harder than anything I've ever tried.
So Bibliography has been out for almost a year now, and I think the most interesting part of that film is that sequence where Alex Megos does his ring training routine. It looks so cool, and I always wanted to try it out, but I was really intimidated because it's Alex Megos.
And if you do not eat carrots, your existence means nothing to me.
So breaking down his ring sequence, it kind of goes like this. He usually does a muscle up, front roll, then a bent arm planche. And then here he does a back roll and then a front lever, which he pushes up.
I tried it out, and in the last 2 months I was able to learn that sequence. My form is obviously not as good as his because he's been practicing the gymnastics part of training for quite a while. Is gymnastics training necessary in climbing? It's debatable, but after trying out this ring routine, I really noticed some improvements in the strength of my wrists and my elbows. When I first started out, or even when I was learning the muscle up in general, I had a really hard time bearing with the soreness or the tenderness of my wrist and my elbow. But after training it for quite a while, the pain really went away, and it made my whole shoulder, elbow, and wrist muscles really strong. So I guess somehow it has to translate to being able to climb better, or at least having better protection against injury.
But it was at some point where, in the climbing world, doing gymnastic exercises was not really very common.
We thought it makes sense to build the bigger muscle groups, to train the bigger muscle groups as well. Not only everything works together, and you need a proper body to do all these hard moves, and that you get not injured. You need strong shoulders, and we always thought that your shoulders, they can improve.
I'll discuss some of the baseline strength skills that I knew how to do before, and then I'll jump straight into the tutorial.
These were some of the ring skills that I was able to do before starting the routine. So first I was able to do 2 muscle ups on the rings, and they were strict, so I wasn't like using a lot of momentum to go up. And secondly, I was also able to do 5 ring dips with a support hold. And I was also able to do a front lever already before starting. I've already made a tutorial and progression video for the front lever, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this tutorial. I'll link my tutorial down in the description below. So in this tutorial, I discussed the front roll, the bent arm planche, back roll, and the front lever tutorial is already in a separate tutorial. Here's my progression for the front roll. So on the first day, I mainly tried to get over the rings and flip my legs over. I used the pad underneath so I could get over the fear because it was quite scary at the beginning. And most of the time, I wasn't able to flip over actually because I didn't have the muscle strength for that specific move yet. And I guess the first day is just trying to get over that feeling of the fear and get the feeling in general. I think my elbow, like my left elbow and my left wrist, was also quite sore after, and this was a great way to build the strength in those parts of my arms. On the second day of learning the move, I was able to get over the rings easier, but I couldn't overcome that force of when you flip over, the legs really want to just swing and touch the ground. So I watched this video and it mentioned to use your legs and wrap it around the straps just so you can lessen the force of it going down. This was kind of helpful for a moment, but I'll tell you why it wasn't too great for the progression later. So by wrapping your feet around the straps, it does help with the force going down, but realistically, if you were to let go of your feet will swing down really fast, which is why I really swung down really hard right here. So that's the thing, when you use the straps to help you, it really handicaps the movement, but it doesn't help you build the strength or build the learning of the technique for the front roll, and that's why I don't recommend it. The next session, I tried to not use the straps at all, which was when I figured out something very pivotal and key. The best advice I can give is to use a camera and to analyze this. Make sure before you flip, your back cannot be too vertical and over the rings. Otherwise, once you flip, the force of your legs will not be overcomable. Yeah, like that. So make sure that have your upper body go under the rings as much as possible before you initiate the flip. That's very important. So what I try to think of is to delay as much as possible, have my upper body under the rings first, and then flip, and the momentum of your feet falling down would rather help you on the muscle up going up. So if you really look at these slow-mos, my upper back is a lot under the rings before I flip. And yeah, that's the best advice I can give for the front roll. On the topic of gripping for the front roll, make sure before you flip over that your grip is kind of neutral and it's in the center of the rings. After you flip, your hands will automatically or naturally become a false grip once the rings flip around. So once you're in that false grip, just muscle up over for the ending of the front roll. So moving on to the bent arm planche, I started the training for this concurrently with the front roll. It was really hard because it's the most strength demanding move of the whole sequence. I would supplement the training for the bent arm planche with doing these push-ups. I would do about 5 reps and 3 sets. I would say it's one of the most important exercises for this move. And I also supplemented with using a resistance band on some of my attempts. This was a really thick resistance band, and I think being able to hold the move at your limit, just like trying to hold as long as you can in that position, is what will really help you build the strength for the move. By seeing my progression as a viewer, I guess it really shows you like just don't give up, because even though some days I would have my off days where I wouldn't see like too much of an improvement, as long as I kept trying and give myself appropriate rest days in between, then I would get better. And here I'm actually showing like every single day that I attempt it, because every single day that I would have a session, I would record like a little snippet of my session. I still continued to do the push-ups, and I eventually was able to hold it with a straight leg pretty long. And then by the time that I can't hold the straight legs anymore, like after a couple sets, I would move on to just doing bent legs. And that could give you like another couple of sets. I then transitioned to the parallettes. It's nice that you have like something to actually wrap your hands and grab onto instead of having like flat palms on the ground. But it's really hard to stay balanced and flat. My head would always be near the ground for my body to compensate, and I was never able to shift my body around to really get straightened. And transitioning to the rings was actually also not that scary if you have a pad under you, but still I was not able to flatten my body out. So I kept doing this trial and error type sessions on the rings, but I really didn't get any much more progress just by doing this. And this was because there's actually a technique that I was missing out. So if you notice in this photo, Alex Megos actually has his rings turned diagonally outwards. And that really helps with trying to find the balance. And thus I tried to do it with the parallettes. I turned the grip outwards like this, and I was able to just make my body flat. And that's how I learned the bent arm planche. Applying it back to the rings was pretty much the same as the parallettes, and yeah, that's how I learned it. So now we're going to discuss the back roll. Before you even attempt it, make sure you can do 5 of these dips on the support grip, just so you have the strength to catch the back roll, because it's kind of scary. For this skill, I also used a resistance band to help carry my weight when I roll towards the back. And basically the first thing I did was go into support, dip down, and then tried to put my hips over the band. And for a good 2 sessions, that was all I did. Because even though the skill, it requires a kick to flip you over and catch it, I didn't want to do it yet because I wanted to make sure that both my arms were strong enough and that my elbows were ready to take the load rather than just jump into it straight away and risk getting injured. So here I'm still doing what I did on the first day actually. No kick yet, just having my hips high and then rolling over. And here was the first time that I actually made it onto my feet. It's also important to note that for the back roll, once you're under the rings, you need to be in a false grip position. It gives you more control of the rings and a better ability to get over the rings. Then for my next session, I decided to actually implement the kick for the back roll. So I watched this tutorial to get some insight.
And simultaneously kick my legs out, shoot them out that way. And then what that will do, it's gonna flip me over and hopefully I'll be in this position.
So anytime someone tells you that hopefully they could do something and they're trying to teach you it, that's kind of like a red flag, right? So his tip of kicking his leg about 45 degrees backwards was really, really bad. And I actually clung on to this idea for a while and it stalled my progression for the back roll.
So today I might not even get, all of mine in.
So here were my attempts that day. So one thing that I did right though was try to make sure that my hips were as high as possible before I kicked backwards. Except I tried to kick directly backwards or 45 degrees backwards and it was not helpful. Like I wasn't getting it and then I tried to do it on the ground to get some muscle memory. But that was the wrong type of kicking and yeah, pretty much didn't go anywhere. I would kick and then land on the resistance band and then keep trying. I think for this session, I tried over 20 or 30 times trying to get it and none of them made it. Even on this attempt where I lightly touched the band, it still required way too much power now that I think of it in hindsight. The next session, I had this observation that I might have used the resistance band and made my rings a little bit too close. And that would create some problems like not having enough room for my body to go through or not being able to flip the rings for the transition. So for the next attempts, I would keep the band a little slacked. That way I have more room to move. And they were mostly there so the rings don't separate left and right. And here I was still doing that stupid kick all the way backwards and it didn't really lead me anywhere until this last attempt where I kicked straight up and I was almost like I caught it. But I didn't realize it until I checked the camera footage later. So for my next session, I mainly focused on getting my hips high by when I pull up, I try to get the hips high as much as possible. And then I would kip with my legs straight up just enough to miss the beam without kicking it. And that would give me a lot of air whenever I try the back roll. And with those tips, hips high and kicking almost vertical, I was able to get really floaty on the transition and almost catch it. I just tapped my leg a bit here. So the next session, I would warm up on the resistance band so I can warm up like my elbows and my wrists. But after getting warm, I would take off the resistance band, and right when I took it off, I landed my first back roll. So hips high and then just kick vertical. Sorry if I'm repeating it, but that's like mainly what I think about. And yeah, I worked on connecting all of the skills thus far, and actually on that same day, I was able to connect most of the skills. My front lever wasn't that great, like my butt was really dipped because I was really tired that day, but I still like connected it.
Alright guys, that's a wrap. So once again, the front lever tutorial is in the description. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like to help me with the algorithm. And if you'd like, subscribe. Peace.